in the department, environmental code enforcement would not be the priority pick I would make. I would choose a priority of making sure that we have quality housing. And if there's any, I know what code enforcement we've been faced with. And yes, we have some environmental stuff that we go after, but I'm not scratching my head going, I wish I had more resources. We need resources is some of the zombie properties. We need not just resources in DCD, we need resources in legal to address these situations, because we've got people living in housing that is inadequate, and we're trying to get ahead of it, and it's very difficult.
Okay, so Andrea, it's almost a great segue. I think what we'll do is, before we go into the next item, I may have you just give us a little bit of an update on affordable housing, where we're at, how our current goals are looking, and what's maybe some of your needs are. Quinn?
Sure. This is actually a good segue, because I'm not sure if my item should be under code enforcement or affordable housing, but I really want to increase funding and or enforcement for abatement properties. And Andrea, I'm not sure if that's the same thing as a zombie property, but I do see so many homes that are sitting empty or inadequately dilapidated, and if we could, you know, use that as another tool to get more stock in and lower some prices, that I really think that would be important. So I'm not really sure if that goes in code enforcement or is into affordable housing right now.
Let's talk about it under affordable housing. I'm not saying it couldn't come back up into in code enforcement. I feel like code enforcement feels like a weird, when I redefine this as the main bullets as priorities, I feel like it's weird to say that code enforcement is our priority. So if something like that, or even, you know, on those critical areas, might fit better under environmental stewardship, under affordable housing or things like that. So,
and I've got a graphic that might help you think about it. And if I could, and I don't want to insert myself into your discussion, but it might help you to see this graphic and to think about it, because I think that's the direction you're going.
I'd say cue it up, Andrea, and
okay.
hang on a second. So what I'm suggesting we do is move on to affordable housing at this point. I'm not saying critical areas, and obviously the abatement that we just brought up is off the table. But let's plan to, if everyone's okay with this, we're going to just kind of strike code enforcement as a priority. That just seems like, I mean, can you imagine us right now saying policing is a priority, right? Policing is not a priority. Public safety is a priority. You know, public health. There's lots of priorities. The enforcement is not a priority, right? I mean, it's. Anyways, I hope that understands. Okay, so I think we're done with item 3, code enforcement, as sort of a open to our segue to affordable housing. Andrea.
So I'm going to try to share my screen, and I think of code enforcement as one of the tools to achieve your goals. It's not a goal in and of itself, and I think you'll see that with this graphic that I've got here. And tell me when you can see it.
I can see it.
Should it be a whole bunch of bubbles? That's what you see?
Yeah.
I like to think of affordable housing as there's 3 aspects of it. There's supply issues, there's stability and preservation, as well as subsidies. And it's these 3 things that work together. And there are 3 different agencies, if you will. There's private sector, there's local government, and there's housing agencies, and we all have a part in that. And I just wanted you to share, I wanted to share with you what we're doing so you can appreciate the things that we're already working on and the things that are coming up that you haven't seen yet. So related to supply, the council's been seeing this stuff for years. We've been working through what we call the Infill Toolkit, and I've got a link here, but if you just Google Bremerton's Infill Toolkit, you'll see all of the things that we've been making progress on to make zoning code changes to make sure we're making sure that there's an adequate supply. And the things that we're working on in the Infill Toolkit right now are duplexes and triplexes. We call them zero lot line development usually, as well as cottage housing. So those are things that are coming forward through the Planning Commission right now. We're also doing some tweaks to our definitions. So you're going to see that in the coming months. Predictable permit timelines are important to the private sector. You did some investments last year to give us more permit people so that we can make sure our timelines are quick. And this is back to your comment is, get these zombie properties back into productive use. This over the last year, we've had really successful cases of taking some of our properties through receiverships and getting them back into productive use. It's a slow process, but it's been underway. I think we had 5 of them in 2021 that we completed, and we're going to continue doing so. So that's what we're doing to affect the supply. And that's, that's an integration of city operations. This isn't just DCD. We're working with finance, we're working with legal, and this has tremendous impacts onto our legal team of them having enough resources to make this happen. On the other side, for stability and preservation, council's made sure we've had investments in weatherization and minor home repair. We're working to develop the development displacement program. So if there's new products that are happening, new apartment buildings that are proposed, and somebody's going to be displaced, we're working on a program. And if you remember in the 2022 budget, you set aside money, but we promised we wouldn't spend the money until we have an adopted program. That's going to be coming through. Our code enforcement team of people, when they get calls from tenants that are in these substandard housing units, we've made it practice to work with our housing agencies to try to get those people resources so they get into better units. So that's not code enforcement per se, but it's us trying to work with where we know where there's resources to help people get into better housing conditions. So code enforcement is your tool, and not a hammer tool, but a helpful tool to help folks. And then on the flip side of that is trying to go after the landlords to make sure that they're fixing these units and they're not getting them back into the hands of somebody else is just going to be affected negatively by living in a poor unit. And then on the third part of the triangle here, we've got subsidies, and you've done great work with our rental assistance program and funding that. There's the multifamily tax incentive, and there's some questions about whether we'll take forward amendments to that program. And the mayor's been working with Tom with our utility. FCS group is doing an evaluation is, can we give a special consideration to affordable housing projects, especially those developed by BHA or Kitsap Community Resources, to have some utility cost offset. So the FCS group is evaluating that and seeing what can be done to our utilities. So that's another thing that's underway. And I can leave the graphic up if you want to ask me questions about it. And then I can also speak to what we're going to be doing in the city's comprehensive plan, because there's some big changes that are coming forward related to state law and what Washington State Department of Commerce is going to be working on. And I'm going to see if I can stop sharing.
Why don't you leave it up for now? We'll see
Okay.
what questions take us.
But you can't see people, can you, if I keep it sharing?
I can, because I'm on a laptop.
Okay.
So, Anna?
Could you email it to us, please, Andrea?
Oh, I'd be happy to do so.
Okay. Quinn?
Thanks, Andrea. This is extremely helpful. I was just going to ask for the utilizing the code enforcement for receiverships. What resources could council be helpful in increasing the number of properties? I know there were 5 properties, and it's kind of a long legal road that you have to go through, but how can we help both you and legal increase the number of properties that go through that program?
I'm going to ask Kylie to help me out here, because I think that our weakest, I don't want to say weakest link, but it's a resource issue. There's also highly specialized attorneys that do this. So we've been contracting with the outside attorneys to help us with this, and it's their capacity to be able to do enough to get them because there's only one person that's been doing them for us. So. And then within the legal team, they've got a lot going on, and we've been giving them a lot of code enforcement cases. So I guess I'd defer to Kylie to talk, because that's, I think, our probably biggest need at this point.
Right, and so the way these abatement actions work is that it's a standard abatement action, but the relief requested is that the court appoint a receiver. And that's important to understand, because in discussions about this before, people have said, well, can we use these to have these turned into affordable housing? And so, no, we can't. That's not what this process is about. It's a straightforward abatement. These are not our homes that the city is acquiring through eminent domain or anything like that. It's an abatement action, but in a typical abatement action, you have an opposing party. And so the court can order the property owner to take the action that we're requesting. in these particular cases for what we are calling zombie properties, there's not a responsible owner. They're often homes that are abandoned because a person passed away. They might have had no will or no family members who live nearby, or someone, no one really knew what to do with the property. Maybe some relative in another state has keys. They might have entered into some sort of arrangement for a caretaker for the property until they figured out what to do with it, but that has happened, years past. So often our abatement actions on these properties are, you look at the legal caption, and it's the city of Bremerton versus, the heirs and the unknown heirs and devisees of the estate of, someone. And then following that chain, it'll sometimes be even multiple layers of people that might have an interest in it. And so what it is that the receivership is essentially, more people are more familiar with the term like a guardian, right? So the court will appoint a guardian for a person. The court appoints a receivership for a receiver for a property. And so we actually can, the receiver that we use, it has been very, very effective and responsive to some of the nuances with these properties. And we've just really had a great relationship with this. It's Capital Financial, and the receiver is a guy named Gary Hunter, but the court also appoints receivers counsel. So the receiver gets appointed their own lawyer. They don't work for us. The receiver is appointed by the court. We make a recommendation for who the court appoints, but they're not in a contractual relationship with us, because under the statute that governs their operations as receivers for property, they have obligations to the court to see that essentially like the highest price gets purchased for the property, because it's used, that purchase money is then put into a trusted type account that all of the debtors that might be on the property can be paid from. So there's usually county taxes that are back, there's utility, there might be judgments and things against the property. And so the receiver's obligations are to the court, not to the city. We end up being one of those creditors because we've usually had code enforcement actions and accrued fines. But as far as the background, what happens with us is when we get the file from DCD, any action in which we're the plaintiff and we're controlling the case, those are things we work on when we're not dealing with questions from counsel, items that are on the agenda that are coming forward, items from other departments, that we need to do research on to keep the day-to-day operations rolling. And so those generally fall to our litigator, which you guys know is Brett Jetty, and Brett has a lot on his plate. The city, the 5 or it was actually 6 that the city got off the ground in 2001 were actually through me as a private contractor. So we didn't have the bandwidth on staff to get those off the ground. And so Roger contacted me and hired me to represent the city on those. But I wasn't on staff, so I wasn't dealing with the day-to-day operations of, the city attorney's office at that time. And we got 6 of them filed, and I think almost all of them are resolved. We can provide an update at one of our litigation updates that we do. But I would say it's just for us, it's having the time and, the outside resource or outside resources and to prosecute those actions. And not every property, they're so unique. It's hard it takes time to figure out if the receivership's the proper course of action. You don't do them on the ones that we try to work with if we can identify an owner, through record searches and things like that, we try to work with them first so that we don't have to go through a lawsuit to get the property cleaned up or sold. So there's quite a bit of investigation that goes into it as well.
Yeah, that's super, super helpful. And that was just my quick follow-up was if you can identify the legal title owner, you do have a mechanism to kind of incentivize them to
sure, it's a bunch of fun.
This is kind of like something you kind of hold over their heads is like, hey, this property has been abandoned, it's in disrepair, the lawn is out of control. people have been using it as like, you know, a drug haven possibly. You can say, we have the ability to go through this abatement process. So you need to do something.
Yeah,
about it.
we send a letter to them usually. Generally, like our escalation process begins with code enforcement, trying to run down what they can through property records and contacting the person and doing a notice of violation. It then goes to our hearing examiner, and sometimes that will, you know, it's not a depending on the level of contact and the quality of contact, it sort of just it dictates how quickly we move on this. If it's a person who's like, oh my goodness, that's my Aunt Sally's house, I had no idea, I thought my cousin was taking care of it, let me talk to my husband and see if we can figure out what we need to do to get the property. And then, you know, like, we'll get back to you in 2 weeks. We call them and then they say, well, we realize now that we need to hire an attorney to help us get a probate started so that we can, you know, legally get title to the property. We're meeting with an attorney next month. We'll give you a call afterwards. And so before we know it, I mean, you don't want to initiate the action if you're going to get compliance voluntarily. And some of this just takes time to unravel. And we do get the compliance on those. But when we finally do the first step is to take it to the hearing examiner. Then the second step is to take it to court. And then once we get the receiver appointed in court, which I usually try to do, and we might have to change that process, but at the initial filing, like I go ex parte and I say it's, you know, I explain to the court that it's an emergency. So at that point we've had a hearing examiner order that's been complied with. But once the receiver gets on board, the problems for the neighborhood generally are resolved very quickly. Capital Financial has the ability to basically bear the cost of these and then invoice us later. And so they get lawn companies out there to clean up the garbage and the vegetation and to pack up all of the debris and to secure the building and things like that. And so usually once we've gotten to the step that there's relief to the neighborhood quickly, and then everything that happens after that, which usually takes about a year, they don't know because it's just stuff that's going in court and the property's then being taken care of.
So, great.
And we're pretty unusual in this. I think the only other city that does this is Spokane. So I'm not sure if other people have jumped on the bandwagon. I heard about it at a conference talking to the Spokane attorney, looked into it to some more. We did our first one when I was on staff, I think back in 2017. And then they kind of stopped when I left. And then yeah, and so then I did the ones when I was contracted.
Great. Thanks for helping us understand that. I think it's a really important tool. And if you ever need funding for like contract attorneys that can handle it, I at least would be supportive of that. Thanks.
Sure.
Okay, Denise.
Yeah, I thought that the question was, you know, really what would you need if council determined, as I think we probably would, that this is a priority and it's obviously going to demand more resources. This is a really good time to influence that. And I'd rather influence it now before y'all go into budget. And Michael, I know all about if you add something, you got to take something or you got to find something and all of that. But if we operated on that alone, things would just keep moving along the same. And so either reallocation or additional monies. But what I'm hearing from Quinn, and I would think probably Jeff, you know, I don't know what the litmus test would be for this, but obviously Bremerton is full of these types of properties, and it's a negative impact to everybody, and there are so many programs out there that could help. So I would be extremely supportive of reinvesting or investing, you know what I mean? I leave it all up to you guys, but I certainly would strongly support that.
Sure. And I mean, and go ahead, Andrea.
I was just going to say is that with the receiverships, we have some money in our abatement fund, and that money gets spent to take care of the receivers and to pay the bills where we have to, and then we get reimbursed. So it could come to a point where we've got so many that are out there, we've spent the abatement fund down and the money hasn't come back, and we may need additional money for the abatement fund. We aren't at that point right now, but it could be that we have so many of these going that we've got so much money that are outlaid and we're waiting for the revenue to come back. It could come to that point, but we're not there at this point in time, at least with the abatement fund.
All right.
Yeah, it is something that we're able to recover our costs pretty successfully, because what's nice about this is that our costs are, you know, per property they don't exceed the sale of cost. So there's money left over, and you know, and it sometimes goes into, I mean, the registry of the court, because there's no one to claim it, and it ends up escheating to the state. So I mean, we're able to recoup our cost, but I certainly appreciate the comment, Councilmember Fry. I don't have an answer today as exactly what resources I needed. If I had a wish list of how much it would take for me to hit every property that is what I would call eligible, or where this would be, what would that look like? I can tell you, I mean, we could run the numbers on what it cost me, like, to do them privately. And it would just, you know, and maybe that would be something that we could look at as a special project. And I can work with, you know, the mayor and Andrea to look at, like, what enhancements would we need for this particular tool to utilize it in a bigger way.
All right, thank you. Denise, I just want to say, how dare you? But I know, no, totally. I mean, it's just, those are facts about how it comes. And it's about identifying, is it a problem, and are we willing to make that money happen? So I think we're very clear to DCD and the attorney's office that there seems to be good support for expanding this program if we can. But I'm not sure we're at the place where they consider it a problem or a priority. We could force the issue. We could make them do it, but I would rather work with them. But if I could ask you guys to maybe come up with a little bit of a list on where we're, you know, what the, I don't know if we have an exact number or perceived number of houses out there, and you know, how well we're tracking on it, because it does feed into affordable housing, any unit that's off the market, and it also detracts from the neighborhoods and things like that. So thank you. Anna.
Thanks. So one quick comment on this abandoned home is several cities, Oakland, Vancouver on the West Coast, have instituted a vacancy tax, which would be a potential source of revenue. And Oakland, at least, has been running since 2018. Are we moving forward from this topic onto other aspects of Director Spencer's graphic? Or do you want to stick with this for now?
Not just yet. Yeah, if we're just really trying to just address anything that Director Spencer introduced, and then we're going to go into our actual goal here in a moment. So,
well, I would like to talk briefly about subsidies then, which is one of the proposals I have pitched, is that we use city-owned land.
Hold on to it though. So
I'm holding.
Okay, so we're really just going back to Andrea's opening comments. Jennifer.
Yeah, I think for the sake of order, I'm going to just go ahead and pause on my comment and wait till the appropriate time.
All right, so we're on item 4, quality, affordable housing. Continue connection with Bremerton Housing Authority and Kitsap Community Resources. Explore options for implementing tiny houses on wheels with design standards as permanent housing. Secure additional funding for affordable housing programs. I do want to actually ask Andrea for an update on sort of where is the city right now with our codes and tiny houses